Good morning, hello, how are you doing? It's good to see you. Welcome along to our FTUK daily live stream. It is Wednesday, the 30th of October, nearly November, and it's going to be an important day in the UK this morning. The European session is pretty much going to focus, for the most part, around the UK budget, which is coming up in a few hours' time. You won't be able to fail to miss it if you're in the UK. It's literally going to be plastered everywhere. And for good reason as well, because it's important, so it's certainly for the economy over here, obviously, and the knockover effect onto markets will be visible if Rachel Reeves gets things wrong. And that's happened before, as I'm sure everybody remembers the gilt crisis from a couple of years ago when they had that mini emergency budget when Liz Truss was the Prime Minister. So yeah, we need to be very, very careful when we understand exactly what's going on. So what we'll do is I want to do a little preview of that, and I want to also just look at the what potentially might be on the cards for the pound today. But first, what we'll do is just do a quick sweep round of all the stuff that's been happening overnight. There's a few bits in there, but nothing too much. Actually, the news out of the US last night overnight is actually quite light, so there's not a huge amount to get through. But we'll just jump straight through and then get onto the UK. So we'll start in Europe. Obviously, we had GfK numbers, which were slightly better than expected, but no joy for Germany out of the last 24 hours. And in the FT overnight, they've published an article saying that Germany's loveless coalition teeters on the brink of a breakup. The Chancellor has snubbed the partners, fueling speculation of early elections in spring. Yeah, more political instability. Seems to be getting that in Japan, and now also a little bit of that in Germany as well. Not good at all. German Economic Ministry on EU tariffs on China EVs as well. We have campaigned for a negotiated solution with China, and we will continue to do so. It's very, very important when you hear metrics and any dialogue around the importation of cars, because it's such a big industry, and it's really important to keep a track of that. So yeah, not so good out of Germany this morning on the wires. A little bit here from the Swiss National Bank as well, from the SNB chair. Further rate cuts could be necessary in the coming quarters to maintain price stability. I'm a big fan of the Swiss franc. I've really enjoyed trading it over the last few years. The Swiss National Bank are a law unto their own. I love the way that they operate. They just do what they want when they want. We're not going to do a deep dive into the SMB in this stream. There's too much to do, but yeah, it's a fascinating subject, that's for sure. And this as well from Macklem as well. As we've said all week, he's been speaking on the wires all week. If the economy evolves broadly in line with our forecast, we anticipate cutting our policy rate further to support demand and keep inflation on target. Okay, so let's move on and let's do with the main stuff for today, the UK budget. Now, I did some research into this yesterday, so I've got a reasonable handle on what potentially might be in the offing. Certainly, my overall view of the pound is I'm bullish on the pound. It's only really going to fall apart, I think, for the pound if Rachel Reeves gets it wrong, and we'll figure out exactly where that's going to come from in a second. Few news articles to talk about first. This is first from Bloomberg, citing the pre-budget briefing, and nobody knows specifically what's in it, but so it's all conjecture at the moment. But this is what you've got to do as a trader. You've got to try and get what you can, fit it together in the best way possible, and use that as a framework to go forward. And then you can still even be wrong, and that's what you have to get used to in markets. But what you have to do is always be prepared, and that's what today is all about. So Reeves is expected to set out 35 billion in tax rises. Now, I suspect that is like a whisper number, as in like that's probably about right. I can't think she's going to come out and say it's only 15 billion. I think it probably is going to be in line with what that number is expecting. 35 billion in tax rises and spending cuts, along with a reshaped fiscal rule to give her space to borrow more for public investment. That reshaping of a fiscal rule, fiscal means tax, That is the thing that I think the markets are uncertain of, because that sounds like a shifting of the goalposts to basically find a way to spend more money by just reframing, basically just moving the goalposts, saying we're going to measure this in a different way, which allows for spending in another direction. I don't think the market's like that. The market is a little bit more of an accountant in that sense. It wants to add up the balance sheet and say, yes, X equals Y. And if it doesn't get that, just because you've manipulated it, there's no way the markets will stand for that, and definitely not. This as well from the Times as well, quoting the Confederation of British Industry. This was early this morning as well. They're warning that the Chancellor of a perfect storm of tax hikes, higher minimum wages and workers' rights bills that will deter employers from hiring more people, particularly those who have been out of work for a long time. Now, just pay attention to this bit here, because I'm going to come back to this when I've gone through the preview. This is the important bit. And this could be, I think, for the first time I've seen things line up in a way which could be putting Britain on a path where we may potentially not want to go into, basically walking into a black hole, which we're not going to get out of particularly easily. So this is how I think the land currently lies at the moment. The problem that we've got in the UK is inflation still, and it's specifically the stickiness of service sector inflation. You get two types of inflation. Goods inflation, which is the stuff that you buy, the physical stuff that you buy, and then also services. Going to the dentist, going to a financial advisor, anything that is service orientated rather than something that you're physically purchasing. The service sector inflation is still slightly elevated here in the UK, and that is really in comparison to a lot of other countries. And what that means is, to counteract that, you have a generalized tone of needing to keep interest rates a little bit higher for longer. And what that does is it means the Bank of England will have to then start to cut their rates slower, widening the interest rate differential between, say, for example, the United States or Europe or Japan, widening that gap and just holding it there for a little bit longer, which gives us a very, very positive interest rate environment in the UK. That is what's bolstering at the pound at the moment. That's why the pound has held up particularly well, and it's not been, constantly under pressure day after day. That's one of the key reasons. But the problem with that is that if you've got an environment of slightly higher interest rates, what it means is that the borrowing for the government, because the government, when it borrows money on the bond market and it issues bonds, it's got to pay interest. Yeah, just like you have to pay interest on your credit card. It's the same thing. Once you start to borrow in an environment where the interest rates are a bit higher, it costs you more. So this is the environment that Rachel Reeves has got to go into the budget with today. The cost of borrowing in the UK over the sort of the medium to long term is going to be slightly higher than it is in other places. That means you're racking up debt, which means you've got to find a way to pay for it. And that's basically it. So the government borrowing costs are generally going to be higher. And if you want to then basically go on a spending spree, you'll need to be able to account for it all. That's the bit that the market is looking for. If she can account for it, happy days, no problem, everything's great. If she can't account for it, then gilts will go down, and then also sterling will become under pressure as well. Now, this is the thing, like I said right at the start, what she's doing is she's changing some of the way that the measurement, that tax is measured in such a way, and it's a bit too, I don't really want to go into too much detail about how that works, but the point is the moving of goalposts in the way that tax is measured, fiscal metrics are derived at, that is going to allow her to basically manipulate the figures and then therefore say, well, I can spend more because of this, the way that the calculations work. Now, if the markets don't buy that, then there's a problem, and that is where the pressure in sterling is going to come from. So the market is expecting new bond issuance. So when the government wants to go on a spending spree, they've got to issue bonds. Usually the Bank of England would be a big purchaser of those bonds. Not so much at the moment, because they're rolling off their debt at the moment. But that is going to account for, with the rolling over of previous debt as well, that's going to account for around about 300 billion sterling over the course of this year, which is obviously a huge amount of money. If inflation is going to remain higher here, and therefore the Bank of England will therefore cut rates much slower, what that's going to do is it's going to do things like, or certainly the Conservative Party would say, what that's going to do is it's going to make mortgages more expensive for people. Yeah. Now, when you couple that extra pressure on the consumer with higher mortgages, and then also what I set up here, where was the graphic, that one there, of higher minimum wages, and therefore a sort of like a tendency for employers not to hire as many people. That is the very, very beginning of what is called stagflation. And stagflation is basically an economic environment where you get slow growth, you get higher unemployment and higher inflation. So we have sticky service sector inflation, we have as general higher unemployment, coupled with slow growth. If we're not growing as a result of that, that could put the UK on a course that's very, very, very specific, and it's quite hard to get out of. So there's a lot riding on today. There is an awful lot riding on today, that's for sure. So let's have a look at the pound. Let's have a look at the markets for sterling. I've got the S&P 500 there at the moment, but let's have a look at sterling. And we're looking quite healthy at the moment, but you know, and this is it's intraday volatility, so just bear that in mind. This is the keep your analysis but nice and simple analysis. We are going to get movement on the pound today, there's no question. This is the chart that I'm going to start with. This is a daily time frame you can see in front of you now. This is the this area here. I'm a follower of commercial hedgers. Commercial hedgers are the big companies, and they position themselves in a market to hedge against price movements. So once they're positioned for a particular direction, usually they're right. So what this area here from the 23rd of July indicates, that's all the way down from 129.30 down to 128.85. What that indicates is that's the most extreme short positioning, as in hedging out the risk of sterling going higher, that they've been for a very, very, very long time. So that's a really important inflection point from a commercial point of view. That price zone, that price range. Now you can see we've actually held that quite nicely, which is definitely a positive thing for sterling. Now this is the linchpin for me. This move down here from the highs here at the end of September from 134, we've navigated south by around about 400 pips. This markets, study a guy called Al Brooks, really, really interesting guy. He talked a lot about the market cycle, and this here, when you start to go into a range bound market, or you get a sort of like instead of like a direct movement, you then start getting a ranging environment here. You can see it here into a channel here. This area here, there's a lot of subtraction of money coming out of the market, as measured by the volume and open interest on the CME. Markets don't usually like that kind of thing. If you've got to move lower in a market, you need money going in to push it. You need that. If that money is not there, then all that really happens is that the market just sort of gets pulled into a direction like a rubber band, and then it pings back in the other direction. So my rough estimation of the pound today is that we are overall bullish on the pound, and I think that this is basically going to act as a really good area of support. Now there's a caveat here. You've always got to have, and I'm a big fan in markets of having a line in the sand, because I understand exactly how important this area is. The bottom of that area, I can't know precisely, but that bottom area for me tells me, okay, well, if my thesis on the pound is right, if we are going to get a pound market that is going to move to the upside, then that has to be, we need to stay above there. So from a budgetary point of view, with the volatility we could expect today, could we collapse from here? Yes, we could. But if I wanted to remain bullish on the pound, I need it to stay above there. Anything under there, which is 128.87, anything under there, and I can't really see how we could then, be bullish on the pound for the rest of the year. I just can't see it. So to the upside, we've got some really important areas of resistance that we're going to slam into, and that's this little doji here. There's a couple of doji candles here. If I just mark those in, Let me just put my magnet on. Just mark that in there. I just mark that low as well. Whoops, wrong one. That one there, and that one. So those are the areas we're going to slam into as a little crater of resistance, a little ceiling that we're going to slam into. So if we do that, that could give us volatility, you know, an area to rotate back down if the market is going to collapse from here. And then that would give us a range to work within, which is around about... Well, that's only 100 pips there, so we could even go down to where my line in the sand was around about 150 pips. That's perfectly acceptable for a market like this, particularly against the dollar. So there's not a great deal of more analysis needed than that. You can obviously now go down to an intraday time frame, and you can obviously then look to carve that up in however your strategy defines, or however it is your indicators or the tools that you like to use on the market would tell you how to behave. So this is where fundamentals is very, very useful. You can see what I've done there. I could follow any particular strategy that wants to go long or short any market, whether that's an EA or a rules-based thing, or an indicator thing, or a momentum-based system. It doesn't matter. But what my fundamentals have done there is they've given me a big picture to work within. So I've got that sort of tendency to, you can never, at the end of the day, you've always got to trade something, yeah? So you're either negative on the pound for the day or for the medium term, or you're bullish. My analysis tells me that I want to be overall bullish for the pound, but I could still be wrong. So I have to plan for every contingency. So my fundamentals has given me that backdrop. It tells me, number one, which markets to be looking at. It's going to be in play today. You're going to get volatility. And as a trader, you need volatility if you want to make any money. So I've got that. Now, however I want to then look at the market from a trading point of view, have at it. Off you go. You know, you don't need any more from your fundamentals than that. Nobody knows specifically what's going to happen in the budget, and nobody really knows what the market reaction is going to be. But the point is, we understand the context. We're not going to be surprised, and we've got a game plan. We can change, we can morph, we can come back to it, we can deviate from it, but we have a game plan. That's the essence of building a successful trading career, having that plan in your back pocket. Now, that's only on a 15-minute chart there. So you can see there, we've got a nice range to be working with, and we've got a good understanding of why we might be expecting what we might be expecting. That is the budget. Now you can take that and you can look at different markets as well. You could look at the pound against the yen. You'd obviously have a lot of volatility around there because it moves very, 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 very viciously. But nevertheless, you know, the pound is the focus for the morning session. So there we go. That's a good preview of the budget and of the pound for today. Now we're going to look at the jolts. Worked out perfectly. We talked about jolts a lot yesterday. That's not gone away. Obviously, that's going to be the big driver for the rest of the week. But once this budget's out of the way, everything's going to be focusing on those job numbers before the election in the US next week. So we got the jolts absolutely picture perfect, and we've got a beautiful dovish reaction on the S&P, which I will talk us through in the US session open live thing that we do in a few hours time. So that is pretty much everything we've got to do cover for today, aside from to say that obviously today's fundamentals week. This week is fundamentals week, and we're sponsored by Newsquawk and the trusted prop. We said it all week along. News 35 is the coupon code that you need. Grab yourselves one of the squawks and get yourself a massive advantage. It's going to be a great tool to have as we go into the budget, and you can see it all develop in real time. Finally, as well, just remember as well that tomorrow is Halloween, and we have got, I love that graphic, it's superb. We are collecting trading horror stories. So have you got any particular market things? I mean, I've got a few. Any particular market things that have really been an absolute nightmare? I mean, you know, trying to trade options on the VIX or something like that, or trying to trade natural gas when you don't know what you're doing. Some of those really nightmare markets. Have you got any nightmare trading stories or particular things that have kept you awake at night as you've been learning as a prop trader? Send them in. Head over to Discord. And send all of that in to us, and you could be with a chance of winning some prizes. We're going to do all of that in tomorrow's live stream or Friday's live stream, because we've obviously got to do some more streams into the end of the week before we get to non-farm payrolls. But yeah, that is what we have for you for Halloween. And good luck to anybody who sends in a story. I'm going to read them out on the live stream, the best ones, and they win prizes, accounts, all that type of stuff. Okay, that's it. That's everything for now. So have a good European session. Pay attention to the budget. And if you're uncertain, stay out. There's more opportunities to come later in the week. Have a great session. And I will see you all in a few hours for the US Open preview.